Kind of great hair there. Go team. No one's behind Scott.
Sorry. Blocking y'all out. Ready? Okay.
Oh. Sorry, we should have notes up here.
Oh, go.
This is the real thing.
Okay, thank you for being here today, and welcome to 55 Laguna. I want to thank 55 Laguna and Open House for hosting us here today. Open House is an organization serving the needs of LGBT seniors, and many of us worked for many, many years to create this amazing facility and housing for our low-income LGBT seniors. So thank you for hosting us here today. Today, we are announcing a new bill that I introduced at the end of last week, Senate Bill 201. SB 201 will ensure and move away from performing medically unnecessary genital surgeries on babies who are born as intersex. And instead will allow people to make decisions for themselves when they're able to do so about whether or not to have genital surgery. Right now, when babies are born with intersex characteristics, in many situations, a physician will perform immediate genital surgery to quote-unquote normalize the appearance of the baby's genitals. These surgeries are often not medically necessary. There are some situations where they are medically necessary. For example, if a baby is unable to urinate, and this bill does not apply to medically necessary surgeries. This is about situations where a baby is born healthy and able to thrive as a baby, but has genitalia that are considered quote-unquote abnormal by traditional standards. And the problem with performing these medically unnecessary genital surgeries on these babies is that they are highly invasive. There's always risk with surgery, and they can have long-term, permanent, very serious negative health effects as these babies grow into adults. And we believe that people should be able to make their own decisions about their own body, have autonomy over these very significant healthcare decisions, medical decisions about whether to have this surgery, and they certainly can't make that decision as a baby. This issue also impacts the ability of people to express their gender. And when a physician and parents make that choice for a baby, that can often be a permanent, irreversible choice about what gender that baby should be, as opposed to a person expressing their own gender. So this is an important piece of legislation. This will allow people to be able to make their own decisions about their own lives, and we look forward to working very hard in the legislature to build support for it. Last year, I authored, and with our coalition, we passed Senate Concurrent Resolution 110, which was a non-binding resolution urging the medical profession to to put an end and to move away from these medically unnecessary surgeries on babies. We got very, very strong support for that resolution, and as a result of that resolution, we were able to do a lot of public education to make sure that people understand why this issue is important. And I also want to note that although several other states have introduced legislation similar to SB 201, if we are able to pass SB 201 and get it signed by the governor, California would be the first state in the country to adopt this type of legislation. So with that, we're going to hear from several members of our coalition, and I want to introduce Hans Lindell from Interact, one of our sponsors.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Senator Wiener. I'm Hans. I serve as communications director for an organization called Interact, Advocates for Intersex Youth, and I myself am an intersex person. Our community is very excited today. So intersex, as the senator described, intersex, as the senator described, is a word used to describe people born with traits such as chromosomes or genitals that might not line up with typical ideas of what it means to have a male or female body. And some use this word and some don't, but the point is that people like me are often denied the same rights as everyone else. So just as LGB and T were positioned as mental disorders to be fixed, intersex people are often still positioned as physical problems to correct surgically. So a couple of examples of what this means. It's important to name what these surgeries are. So we're not talking about anything that is medically necessary. We're talking about cases in which, for example, a doctor might think that a child's clitoris is too big and might advocate for families to choose a cosmetic reduction. We're talking about cases where a doctor might find gonadal tissue, reproductive tissue, in a person whose sex doesn't otherwise align and advocate for removing that tissue while it could still have fertility potential. We're also talking about vaginoplasties, which a lot of intersex children are subjected to. And this is a very risky and invasive surgery that's often advocated for infants who might not have a vagina, with the assumption that the risks will be worth it for future heterosexual sex. So Interact, our organization, is over 12 years old. We're the only advocacy organization working on this that is led by affected adults ourselves. And so we know firsthand that these procedures affect puberty, sexual function, and potentially fertility forever. And this is what our community has been saying for over 30 years. We're not anti-surgery, we're pro-consent. We want the same rights as anyone else to be able to grow up and make decisions about our own bodies. And so waiting for individuals to grow up and assess their own body and their own risk tolerance is the only decision that gives affected children and their families the most wide open options. So even though we've been saying this, our community has been saying this for a very long time, there are still some practitioners out there that will lobby to make sure that patient voices are unheard, or who say that because some patients are satisfied with this choice, that it justifies the potential devastation for others. So human rights, children's rights, and top LGBT organizations have all stood with us on this. The Human Rights Watch, United Nations, Amnesty International, and the San Francisco Human Rights Commission have all come out in support of the position of individual consent. So California did that too with SCR 110 that we passed last summer. We were supported by the GLMA, ACLU, Trevor Project, PFLAG, and Lambda Legal. So I'm so grateful to all of our allies who have supported us and who are here with us today. It's my pleasure to give the mic over to the legislative director for our co-sponsor, Equality California, Alice Kessler.
Great. Good morning. Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Senator Wiener. My name is Alice Kessler. I'm proud to be here today on behalf of Equality California. We're the nation's largest LGBTQ civil rights organization. And as we take this exciting step forward, protecting the rights of intersex Californians and their families, Equality California brings the voices of LGBTQ people and allies to institutions of power in California and across the United States, striving to create a world that is healthy, just, and fully equal for all LGBTQ people. A critical step in that fight is making sure that our intersex friends, family members, and neighbors are protected and empowered. For far too long, our society has denied intersex children and their families the critical, compassionate health care they deserve. No one should be subjected to unnecessary, irreversible, and life-altering medical procedures without their informed consent. We should give people the opportunity to determine their own future with advice from their doctor and their family when they're old enough to make that decision for themselves. And we should celebrate the diversity of our society, the natural differences that make each of us unique, rather than trying to erase or stigmatize people. This is a critical human rights issue. It's one that deserves attention and action. And it's an issue on which California ought to lead the way. So Equality California is committed to working with the legislature and these incredible advocates here this morning to continue the conversation that we started last year with Senate Concurrent Resolution 110. And we're going to, once again, send a strong message of support to intersex Californians and intersex people everywhere. So I want to thank Senator Wiener and all of the co-sponsors of the legislation. And it's my pleasure to turn it over to Maria Kamcheva and Mackenzie Eakin, who are both medical students at Stanford Medical Center.
Thank you, Senator Wiener, and everyone who's here today. Thank you. Yes, we are much shorter. My name is Maria Kamcheva, and I'm a second-year medical school student at Stanford. I'm here today with my friend and fellow Stanford medical student, Mackenzie Eakin, to support ethical, compassionate care for the intersex community. We are here to support SB 201. As future doctors, we are guided by the principle to do no harm. It's what turns our practice from work into care. If our practice ceases to be patient-centered, we have lost our way as healers. And if we ignore evidence that we are causing harm, we have lost our way as physician scientists.
We are here because we have listened to the voices of intersex people. Many are telling us they have been harmed by medical practices that alter their sex characteristics before they could consent, for reasons that were not medically necessary. We are here to affirm that simply being intersex is not something to be fixed. These are stories of when medicine got it wrong. It is our job to hear them with humility. We, as healing professionals, must be grateful, not threatened, when our patients come forward to help us be better. Many have listened, with more professional guidelines emerging that discourage unnecessary interventions, but we must ensure that these recommendations are followed. We are also here because we've seen the data, or rather the lack thereof. Research has not shown that medically unnecessary surgery is helpful to an intersex child, and yet these procedures can carry risks of deep and long-lasting harm.
Waiting to perform medically unnecessary surgeries gives intersex people the chance to weigh the risks for themselves, as everyone has said before us. It gives our patients the autonomy we strive to uphold in healthcare and helps better ensure that we do no harm. As the next generation of physicians, we are ready to be part of the change. We are in a position of privilege and can help turn a legacy of paternalism into a future of compassionate care. Our patients, both within and out of the intersex community, deserve nothing less from us. And now, Cecilia Chung, Co-Director of Policy and Strategic Projects at Transgender Law Center, will say a few words. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cecilia Chung. Before I got to what I've prepared, I have a side note, is that when I was presiding on the San Francisco Human Rights Commission back in 2004, the report on surgery on intersex infants was one of the reports that I was really excited to support and help to get adopted by the commission. And I am really glad that to see this is finally turning into a piece of legislation by Senator Scott Wiener today in California. And as I mentioned before, I'm Cecilia Chung, and I am speaking on behalf of Transgender Law Center, the largest national trans-led organizations in the country, which advocates for self-determinations for all people. And grounded in legal expertise and committed to racial justice, TLC employs a variety of community-driven strategies to keep transgender and gender non-conforming people alive, thriving, and fighting for liberation. As our mission states, we believe in and advocate for the self-determinations and body sovereignty of all people. A person's gender assigned at birth is sometimes different from a person's true gender identity. That is a story trans and non-binary people know all too well. Without that choice, without the ability to give consent to live our authentic self, many of us had to live with a lifetime of scar. This can be all prevented, especially for the intersex community. This is why we support SB 201. This bill is, if passed, will ensure intersex people can make their own decisions about their bodies, stopping the practice of surgical interventions without informed consent. And we're enthusiastically supporting this bill to move forward. Thank you. Oh, and now I'm introducing Becca Carmen Mauder, Legislative Coordinator Advocate for ACLU.
Hello, Becca Kramer Mauder, on behalf of the ACLU of California, proud co-sponsors of SB 201. Legal recognition of people's rights to make decisions about their own bodies is one of the most pressing issues of our time. With SB 201, California can honor intersex people's right to determine what, if any, genital surgeries and treatments are appropriate for them. Society, including doctors, should not be dictating what a patient's genitalia looks like. That decision must be made by the patient. Performing medically unnecessary gender-assigning surgeries and treatments on young children before they can participate in the decision-making process violates intersex individuals' right to privacy and to bodily autonomy. Although perhaps well-intentioned, these surgeries are based on misguided notions of sex and gender and what is considered normal. Instead of enforcing conformity, we should celebrate differences. That's why the ACLU is proud and excited to sponsor this bill to ensure that intersex individuals have the opportunity to embrace their identities and their bodies before doctors perform risky, irreversible, and medically unnecessary surgeries. We look forward to working with Senator Wiener and our partners to protect and advance the civil liberties and human rights of intersex people throughout California. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Senator Wiener.
Great, thank you. Excuse me. In addition to the organizations and our co-sponsors that you heard from today, I want to thank Human Rights Watch, which is supporting the legislation and has been a stalwart supporter of ensuring that intersex individuals are able to make their own decisions about their own lives. Excuse me. I also want to acknowledge Rebecca Rolfe, the Executive Director of the San Francisco LGBT Community Center, who has joined us. And with that, that concludes our press conference, and we're happy to take any questions. Yes?
Do you plan on any opposition from other medical companies? If so, what is the plan to address that?
The question is whether we anticipate any opposition from physicians' organizations, and I'm sure we will have a robust discussion with the medical profession about this. Last year, in other states, the medical profession has opposed the bill. Last year, the California Medical Association initially opposed the bill, but after negotiations making very, very clear that we're not trying to in any way restrict medically necessary surgeries, they ultimately withdrew their opposition. I don't know what position they'll take this year, but we do know that particularly among some urologists, there is an intense reaction to really to doing what we're proposing to do, namely that individuals should make choices about their own bodies as opposed to having doctors make those decisions about people's bodies when it's medically unnecessary.
So do you know how many of these surgeries are done in California on an annual basis?
I don't. Yes, you want to?
So I can speak to that a bit. It's certainly a very difficult thing to track because hospitals aren't required to do any sort of reporting. I don't know if the senator has any other comment on that.
We don't have an exact number, and I don't want to speculate, but that is not publicly available information. But we do know from the community of intersex people in California that these surgeries are performed on quite a few people.
I wanted to ask about any religious groups that might have popped up in the resolution. I know circumcision is a miles away from this, but it does. Those arguments do come up.
I don't recall participation by religious groups last year. This has nothing to do with circumcision. People can have whatever view they feel appropriate on male circumcision, but circumcision does not assign you a gender. Circumcision does not lead to lifelong medical problems. It's again, people can have whatever view they want. That is very, very different universe than what we're talking about today. Any other questions? Okay, we'll be available on the side. And again, thank you everyone, and thank you to our coalition.